Hello everyone, welcome back. As we all know, Linnea is the new Lunar Crystalize sub-DPS and support character who just showed up in Genshin Impact, and after a very early 50-50 loss, I have Linnea, and I want to talk about how she feels with a variety of different Geo characters. The first character I wanted to look at, of course, is Ningguang. See, Lunar Crystalize has been quite an interesting upgrade for Ningguang because of her many Geo hits resulting in a lot of Geo app. And unlike Lunar Charged and Lunar Bloom, where there's a bit of an ICD on the reaction itself, Lunar Crystalize doesn't seem to have such an ICD, so we can try and take as much of an advantage of this by running double Hydra with someone like Furina. I've mentioned this before, but there's a couple of things that Linnea can bring to the table that makes her quite a solid pick for a Lunar Crystalize Ningguang team. We have Ascendant Gleam, which of course increases lunar damage, but with the last non-moon sign Geo character in the rotation being Ningguang, before she of course starts popping off with her DPS, and the fact that she doesn't actually scale with defense, this does tend to mean that the Ascendant Gleam buff is not going to be as strong, but at least there's something to use. And then of course the other thing that Linnea can bring is team healing with her ult, as opposed to of course someone like Xilonen's single target healing. So how good is Linnea in a Lunar Crystalize Ningguang team? Well, as it turns out, there are in fact a few things that I didn't realize would potentially be problems with her gameplay. So that's what we're going to be covering in this video. But before we get into that, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, because that way you can help support the channel as well as combat that goddamn algorithm. So the two things that I think everyone should keep an eye on are Linnea's energy and her healing. So let's start off with her energy. In a 20-second period, she seems to generate 2 waves of 3 geoparticles. The problem is that whether you use her ult or whether you use her skill, there's a bit of a delay before you can even get the first wave of particles from Lumi. And trying to take advantage of her ult animation duration by starting with her skill, for example, to summon Lumi, doesn't seem to work, because when Linnea uses her ult, she actively grabs Lumi off the field, so while she's ulting, Lumi's actually just not on the field at all. Because of that, Linnea is going to be mostly grabbing her Geo and other various particles off field, which does mean she's getting less energy from her own Geo particles as opposed to being on field. Now, if you watch any of the big TCers, you'll hear that everything I'm talking about right now is mostly irrelevant, and that is true if you're playing, let's say, the Zabai team, where you don't really need Linnea's healing outside of it being absolutely necessary. But this is a team with Furina that we're talking about, and that's where Linnea's healing is not only needed to keep the team healthy, it's also going to get us some of Furina's fanfare. So we're playing a team where we more or less need, quote-unquote, Linnea's ult every rotation. All that being said, though, it's not quite the end of the world though. See, I am currently running a Serenade Linnea build with about 153% ER, and it does seem to be barely enough ER to handle the team for most rotations. The way I've managed to make this work is for the team to go through the 2 Hydra characters' skills and ults, then actually go to Ningguang's skill, funnel that energy to Linnea's ult, then go back to Ningguang's ult, use her skill again, and use her charge attack. Obviously this is C6 shenanigans. If you're running something like Solar Pearl, then you're going to want to chuck in a normal attack before you use Ningguang's ult and skill again, so that you can get the Solar Pearl buff like I am. It is a bit janky by definition, but Ningguang's Jade screen does generate particles on hit, that's why we're funneling them to Linnea's ult, and after Linnea's ult there is a fair bit of on-field time for Ningguang to catch the particles that would be generated after the delay from Lumi. Now, speaking of healing, we gotta talk about Linnea's healing, because as it turns out, it's not as high as I thought it was going to be. Now, generally speaking, we're aiming to build a DPS build on Linnea since she actually does a fair bit of DPS, and I get the feeling this is of course going to be the biggest contributing factor. So with just under 1900 defense on my Linnea build, I seem to be doing a bit over 6200 team healing and 1245 single target healing. For comparison, my R1 Escoffier with some 2186 attack can heal somewhere around the 8k mark for the team healing and around 3.5k for that single target healing. So despite being called Lunar Crystalize Escoffier, it does seem like Linnea heals a fair bit less than Escoffier. And because of that, we're starting off with less fanfare generated. But as if that wasn't bad enough, quote-unquote, we have another perk of the double Hydra Ningguang team to consider: the Hydra characters. Because not only are they Furina and Columbina, 2 HP scalers that typically have a lot of HP, we're usually aiming for around 40k and 35k respectively, but this team has Hydro Resonance, so everyone on the team has more HP. Fanfare is generated based on a percentage of everyone's HP going up and down, so Linnea's already lower healing is now healing characters with more HP than usual, so the proportional HP movement is even lower. All of this to say, by using my Linnea's ult, I seem to be getting around 150 Fanfare by the time Ningguang has done most of her DPS. Compare that to Escoffier on the Skirk team, I'm getting almost all of the 300 Fanfare on my C0 Furina, and that's before I even swap to Skirk, and potentially the healing is probably a little bit too strong on Escoffier to the point where the team doesn't actually get back down to like half health, so that might actually screw around with how much Fanfare I'm actually getting on the next heal. But either way, the point is, Escoffier seems to be generating a fair bit more, well actually significantly more Fanfare for the team compared to Linnea. For comparison, here's the team with Linnea versus Xilonen. Now, Xilonen's single target healing is of course resulting in a different rotation that we see here, needing of course to cycle through the team in order to get that healing on them, but that does seem to result in more Fanfare for Ningguang and Furina to use. Now of course I am comparing my level 80 C0 Linnea running Aqua Simulacra versus a C2R1 Xilonen, so I do end up with around a 10k DPS increase with Xilonen, which is probably accounted for by A, the higher Xilonen investment, and also, well, the fact that Xilonen can give both Hydro and Geo Res Shred as opposed to Linnea's only Geo Res Shred. As we can see, there's a pretty sizable DPS increase in both Furina and Columbina due to Xilonen's C2 plus HP percent buff for them as well, so I guess this is kind of something that you can keep an eye on depending on whether or not you really want to go for Linnea.
Give up! Your life is mine! Don't waste time! Submit! Give up! Don't waste my time! Let the world collide! Time to shine! Don't waste my time! Your life is mine! Give up! Submit! The mountains face royal! Time to shine! Showing you face! Don't waste my
In summary, the rotation needs a bit of jankiness to handle the delay of Lumi's energy generation. Linnea's healing isn't as strong as I had hoped it would be, and if you've already invested in Xilonen, it does seem like she's a perfectly solid alternative anyway, so there we go. Hey guys, this is Kate the Editor. I wanted to show you an alternative way to build Linnea, because this way we can actually get even more Fanfare stacks as well as keeping the team more or less like more healthy than what we saw before. So with this healing, we had about 8k healing in the team healing, and we're still getting around 2k, I think, single target healing, give or take. And so as a direct result of that, we're actually getting more Fanfare. I can actually confirm that by the time Ningguang's DPS kicks in, we're already at around about 200 Fanfare. So that's actually significantly better than what we had previously with the build. And the difference that I made was I swapped from Aqua Simulacra to Skyharp, which is of course a weapon that has crit rate and of course some crit damage. My one of course being an R5 Skyharp, so your mileage may vary. And then instead of using a crit damage hat, we're using a healing hat actually, so that way Linnea is able to heal even more. I can actually confirm that there is of course going to be a DPS difference between using a crit damage hat versus a healing hat on Linnea, and oops, right there. But it's actually just a 4k DPS difference, going from about 100k DPS with a healing hat, as you're seeing here, to actually 104,000 DPS with a crit damage hat. So it's actually quite minor. I feel like a healing hat is a really good idea. With all that being said, I probably still lean towards the affirmative that Linnea is in fact a good choice for a Lunar Ningguang team, because you've got to send a Gleam at least without having to rely on like Ino. while still getting the healing so that you're not relying on like Illuga. So yeah, by having that Ascending Gleam, you can definitely handle those shield mechanics from Nordcry a lot more easily than of course running with Xilonen and therefore only having Nascent Gleam. Let me know what you think what all is in the comments below. Also, real quick, speaking of Illuga, swapping Furina for C2 Illuga is not only like a notable DPS loss as far as I can tell, but also, unsurprisingly, a severe reduction in Lunar Crystalize reactions coming from Ningguang herself. That being said though, I did seem to get only a few less Lunar Crystalize reactions total if we were to add up Ningguang, Linnea, and Illuga, so that's kind of curious. I'd be surprised if C6 Illuga can actually bridge the gap in DPS between running Furina and running him on a team like this. I don't know, I don't have C6 Illuga, and of course I haven't exactly built him properly. I guess I'm running 2-piece EM right now because Linnea is still on Serenade, so I guess that's one of the other things that Illuga can do. He can run Serenade, and then Linnea could potentially bridge the gap a bit more by running Morningstar, and that might change everything. We'll just have to see. I'll have to farm a set in order to be sure about that. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what all this in the comments below. How are you playing your Lunar Crystalize Ningguang team? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, hope you guys enjoyed. If you like this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
In this rotten, decaying world!